What happens when you move into a cheap apartment where no one survives past the third night? The Knocking at 3 a.m. is a spine-chilling horror story about strange sounds, cracked mirrors, and whispers that crawl through the pipes. Every night at 3 a.m., it knocks. And once you hear it, it knows you. Prepare for an immersive horror experience that blends psychological terror, eerie sound design, and a reality that bends with every reflection. You've heard something. You looked. Now it's your turn to answer. If you enjoy dark stories, chilling narration, and late-night nightmares, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss a scare. The apartment was colder than she'd expected. Rain whispered against the fogged window as Eliza set down the last of her boxes. The dull hum of the city far below echoed faintly through the thin walls, blending with the occasional creak of old wooden floorboards. She stood in the center of the small living room, eyes tracing the stained ceiling and peeling paint. It smelled faintly of mildew and something else. Something like wet rust. It was cheap, which was all she could afford after the last few months, after the job loss, after the breakup, after everything had begun to unravel. This place, perched on the third floor of a building no one seemed to talk about, was a chance to reset. She tried to believe that. As night fell, the building grew quiet. Unnaturally quiet. Eliza stood by the window, brushing her teeth, watching as the streetlights below flickered. No laughter, no footsteps from neighbors, no doors opening or closing. Just that still, heavy silence, and the soft ticking of the old clock on the kitchen wall. 2:54 a.m. She should have been asleep hours ago, but something kept her awake. A tension in the air, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then the knock came. A single sharp knock at the door. Eliza froze, toothbrush still in her mouth. She turned toward the door slowly, heart thudding in her chest. Knock. Louder this time. The sound rang out through the apartment, unnatural and cold. She spat the toothpaste into the sink, wiped her mouth, and stepped quietly toward the door. 3 a.m. She glanced through the peephole. Nothing. The hallway outside was empty, lit only by the flickering overhead light that buzzed softly. No footsteps, no shuffling. Just stillness. She hesitated. Maybe someone had the wrong door. Eliza went back to bed, the sheets feeling colder than before. She lay there with her eyes open, listening. The clock ticked and ticked and ticked. Then came the sound again, not a knock this time, a dragging noise, slow and deliberate, moving just outside her door. Like someone was pulling something heavy across the hallway floor. A wet, sticky sound followed, like bare feet against tile. She sat up in bed, pulse racing. Silence. She got up and pressed her ear against the door. Nothing, no sound. But the hallway, it didn't feel empty anymore. That night, she didn't sleep. Morning sunlight was gray and dim, filtered through layers of grime on the window. Eliza made coffee, ignoring the dark circles under her eyes. The memory of last night clung to her like smoke. She opened the door to check the hallway. It looked the same, long, narrow, lined with identical doors. But just outside her apartment, on the worn-out carpet, was a faint smear of something dark red. She knelt to touch it, but it had already dried. Downstairs, the landlord wasn't in his office. No one was. She wandered the halls for nearly 10 minutes before realizing that she hadn't seen a single tenant. Not one. All the doors were shut tight. No sound came from behind them. No TVs, no voices, no music. She checked her phone. No signal. When she tried to leave the building, the front door was locked. Her key only worked on her unit. She rattled the handle harder, then harder. But it refused to move. "Eliza?" a voice called softly behind her. She turned, startled. A woman stood at the foot of the stairs. Pale, wide-eyed, maybe in her 30s. She looked sleep-deprived, her hands trembling. "You just moved in?" the woman asked. Eliza nodded slowly. "Yeah, last night, apartment 3C. The woman flinched. Her eyes darted toward the hallway. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "No one stays more than 3 nights, not since the knocking started." Eliza stared at her, trying to understand. "Do you hear it too?" The woman didn't answer. She turned and walked away, disappearing up the staircase. No sound of footsteps, just gone. That night, Eliza sat with every light on. 2:58 a.m. She stood in the hallway with her hand on the doorknob, daring herself to open it when the knocking came. Her breath caught in her throat. 3 a.m. Knock. She jerked her hand away. 3 slow knocks, deliberate, each one louder than the last. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. No footsteps, no dragging, no whispers, just silence. Eliza stared through the peephole again. Still nothing. But as she turned to go back to bed, she noticed something on the inside of the door. A single handprint. It was smeared in something dark, sticky, too high to be hers. Fingers long, too long, stretched unnaturally wide. And worse, it was on the inside of the door. She backed away slowly, heart racing. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, claustrophobic, like the walls were leaning inward. The air turned cold and damp, heavy with something rotten. The floorboards creaked behind her. She spun around. No one was there, but the lights flickered once, then twice. The air filled with a soft tapping, like nails scratching the ceiling. A low hum vibrated through the walls, like something breathing just out of sight. Eliza ran to the window. Outside, the city was gone. Where there had once been streets and cars and distant buildings, there was only fog, thick, gray, endless. She couldn't even see the sidewalk. She tried her phone again. No signal. No time on the screen. Just black. Eliza collapsed onto the couch, clutching her knees. Her thoughts raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. A knock came from the window. Her head shot up. She lived on the 3rd floor. The knock came again, louder. She stood, heart pounding, slowly approaching. Fog pressed against the glass from outside. Then, fingers, 5 long, thin fingers, rested against the window pane from the outside, leaving streaks of red as they slowly dragged downward. Eliza screamed and stumbled back. The light above her shattered. The knocking at the door returned. Furious, desperate, rapid fire like fists slamming into the wood. She covered her ears, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. Then everything stopped. Silence fell. She stood in the middle of the room, shaking. The lights buzzed softly. The window was empty. The handprint on the door had vanished. The clock in the kitchen read 3:01 a.m. And from somewhere inside the apartment came a low, wet whisper. 3 nights. Eliza didn't sleep. She sat in the corner until morning came, if it ever did. Eliza didn't remember falling asleep. The light outside was pale and colorless, barely cutting through the fog that clung to the window like a veil. The apartment was still, too still, the kind of stillness that made her wonder if time had stopped entirely. She sat up slowly on the couch, her muscles stiff from the awkward position she'd curled into. The clock on the wall still ticked, but the hands hadn't moved. It read 3:01 a.m. She blinked. No, that couldn't be right. She stood and walked to the window. The sky was brightening. It had to be morning. But the clock insisted otherwise. Its rhythmic ticking echoed like a metronome, a sound louder than it should have been in the silence. She reached up and took it down. It was battery-powered. She turned it over. No batteries. The clock had no batteries, yet it ticked. Her fingers went cold. Eliza tossed it into the kitchen drawer and shut it tight, as if sealing something away. She turned back toward the living room and froze. The door, there were scratches on it now, thin. Jagged lines like they'd been carved by broken fingernails. Some were fresh. Wood shavings still clung to the floor beneath. She stepped closer, then paused. Footsteps, soft, barefoot, slow. Period. They were coming from the other side of the door. Eliza's breath caught. She didn't move, barely breathed. The footsteps paced back and forth, just inches away from where she stood. Then they stopped. A long silence, followed by a deep, rattling breath. She backed away slowly, heart pounding. The door remained shut, locked, but she no longer trusted it. It felt thin, fragile, as if it could give way at any second. She retreated into the kitchen, grabbed her phone. Still no signal, no Wi-Fi, no time. The screen was stuck, frozen on a black void. She opened a drawer and pulled out the sharpest knife she could find. It felt absurd, but the weight of it in her hand gave her a sliver of comfort. Then, as she stood there, listening, waiting, her eyes drifted to the hallway. The apartment's layout was simple: living room, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. But something about the hallway between the kitchen and bedroom felt longer, too long, as if it had grown during the night. She walked toward it slowly, feeling the temperature drop with each step. The hallway light flickered above her. The bedroom door was open. She hadn't left it that way. She stepped inside, knife gripped tight, and searched. Nothing, just her bags, still unpacked. The bed she hadn't touched. A single mirror leaning against the wall. But her reflection wasn't right. It was delayed slightly, just by a fraction of a second. She stepped left, the reflection stepped slower. Then smiled. She hadn't smiled. Eliza staggered back, breath shallow. The mirror flickered like an old screen. Her reflection remained still, smiling faintly, even as she turned and fled the room. Back in the living room, the door was wide open. She didn't hear it open, There was no sound, nothing. She approached cautiously. The hallway outside looked darker than before, the flickering light now dead. Shadows clung to the walls like oil. She peered out. Footprints, wet footprints, barefoot, leading away from her door and disappearing around the corner. She should have shut the door. She should have locked it. But instead, she followed. The hallway stretched impossibly long now. Each door she passed was identical, numbered in faded brass. No sounds, no people. Only the echo of her own footsteps. And something else. A faint shuffle, somewhere behind her. She turned quickly. Nothing. The air grew heavy, damp, smelling of stagnant water and decay. Her chest tightened as she reached the corner where the footprints vanished. There was a door here, unnumbered, plain. It hadn't been here before. She reached out, hand trembling, and turned the knob. Inside was a narrow staircase, descending into blackness. She stepped down. The air was colder here, thick like fog. Every creak of the stairs beneath her feet echoed as if in a vast cavern. The sound of dripping water, the scuttle of something small moving just out of sight. At the bottom of the stairs was a room, concrete, wet. A single overhead bulb flickered dimly, and in the center, a chair. A woman sat in it. The same woman from... Her eyes were wide, empty, mouth frozen in a scream. Eliza stumbled back in horror. The woman began to speak, but her voice didn't match her mouth. It came from the walls, distorted, layered, 1,000 voices in one. 3 nights, 3 knocks. Then it comes in. Eliza turned and ran, up the stairs, back into the hallway. But it wasn't her hallway anymore. It was dark, endless. Doors on either side opened slowly as she ran, each revealing something worse than the last. Rooms filled with water, blood, whispers, mirrors with moving figures, doors that led only to blackness. She screamed. No sound. She reached her apartment. Slammed the door shut. Locked it. Then she stood in the dark, alone. She dropped the knife. Her hands were shaking too much to hold it. She backed into the corner and sat down. The lights wouldn't turn on. The room pulsed with a quiet hum, like something breathing beneath the walls. The clock ticked again. She hadn't put batteries in it. Tick, tick, tick. 2:59 a.m. Then the footsteps returned. Outside her door. Slow, measured. They stopped directly behind it. Knock. 1 knock. Then 2. Then a 3rd. She crawled toward the peephole, but there was no hallway now. Just a void. A writhing blackness that stared back. And in the center of that darkness, a face. Pale, wide-eyed, grinning with teeth too long, too sharp. It whispered, "Let me in." Eliza fell backward, gasping. The walls cracked. The ceiling groaned. Blood seeped from the corners of the room like it had always been there. She clutched her ears as the knocking started again, faster now, more desperate. Then it stopped. The door creaked open slowly, on its own, and the darkness bled into the room. Eliza woke up to silence, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, thick and unnatural. She lay on the floor, curled beside the front door. Her clothes were damp. The air reeked of mold and iron. Blood had dried beneath her nails, though she couldn't remember scratching anything. The door was closed again. Locked. She hadn't moved it. The apartment looked the same, but felt different. Shadows lingered in corners that should have been empty. The air was too still, as if the entire room was underwater. She stood slowly, legs trembling, and staggered to the window. The city was gone. In its place stretched a sea of gray fog. Buildings were only faint outlines now, swallowed by the mist. No cars, no voices, no morning sun. Just that oppressive, dreamlike stillness. Eliza turned on the tap in the kitchen. Nothing came out. The pipes groaned somewhere deep in the walls, followed by a hollow, knocking sound. She jerked her hand back. It came again. Knock, knock, from the pipes. She backed away, hands clenched, and went to the bedroom. Her phone was still useless. She picked it up, stared into the dead screen. Then, on impulse, she opened the settings. There was only one Wi-Fi network available now. Let me in. She stared at it, pulse quickening. It was a joke. Had to be. Some awful glitch. The name kept flashing. Connect? She turned off the phone. There was a note on her pillow, a torn scrap of paper, yellowed and brittle. It hadn't been there before. Written in smeared ink. You are the last. The others fed it. 3 nights, and it takes what remains. Her blood ran cold. She turned the paper over. On the back was a crude drawing of the apartment door, open. And beyond it, something crawling on all fours, pale, faceless. The memory of last night returned like a cold hand gripping her spine. That thing. It had stood outside her door, but now the door was locked again, and she was still here. Eliza gathered herself. She had to find someone, anyone. She left the apartment with her knife tucked inside her jacket. The hallway outside stretched on in silence. No lights flickered this time. No sounds of dragging. Just silence and dust. She knocked on the nearest door. No answer. Another. Still nothing. Then she saw it. Apartment 3A. Its door was open a crack. She pushed it gently. The room inside was empty, except for furniture covered in white sheets. Dust, thick as ash. But the air felt charged, electric. She stepped inside. The mirror on the wall was shattered, shards scattered across the floor. On the far wall, someone had written in blood, "It wears the face of the one you trust." Her heart thudded. Then she heard it, footsteps, behind her. She turned. The woman from before, the one who'd warned her, stood in the doorway. "Eliza," she said softly, "you shouldn't have stayed." Eliza backed away. "What is this place?" The woman didn't answer. Her smile widened too far, way too far. The skin around her mouth split open, revealing rows of teeth that didn't belong in any human mouth. Eliza ran. She fled into the hallway, heart pounding, breath catching in her throat. Behind her, the footsteps followed. Barefoot, wet, fast. She turned a corner and slammed into a man. He caught her before she fell. His eyes were frantic. "You saw it," he whispered, "didn't you?" She nodded, breathless. "Come on, this way, before it finds your scent again." He pulled her down a service hallway, the walls narrow and flickering with sickly green emergency lights. They passed rusted pipes and doorways that led to nowhere. "Who are you?" she asked. "Travis," he said. "I lived here, weeks ago, should have been gone, but the building doesn't let go." They stopped in a boiler room. It reeked of smoke and old metal. He pushed a heavy cabinet aside, revealing a tunnel, narrow, concrete, leading into darkness. "They built this during the war," he muttered. "Basement access, fallout shelters, forgotten tunnels. I've mapped some, not all. It shifts sometimes." He lit a candle. No flashlight, no batteries worked anymore. Eliza followed him in. They crawled for what felt like forever, the air growing colder, thicker, filled with the low hum of something alive in the walls. Water dripped somewhere. Then they heard it, clicking, wet, sharp, rhythmic clicking. It echoed from behind them. Then, breathing, Travis stopped. His face paled. "Don't move," he mouthed. The sound grew louder, scraping claws on concrete. Then a voice, right behind them. Eliza. She screamed and scrambled forward. They burst into another room, this one lined with broken furniture and old boxes. Travis slammed the door shut and braced it with a metal rod. "That wasn't your voice," he said quietly. "It uses your name. Makes you think you know it." Eliza sank to the floor, shaking. "What is it?" He looked at her with haunted eyes. Something old, hungry, drawn to places where time thins. This building is a wound. People move in, they vanish. Some jump. Some are taken. The knocking? It's not asking to come in. He leaned closer. It's already inside. It knocks to remind you. Suddenly, the door behind them groaned. A low knock. Then another. The rod bent. Metal creaking. Travis grabbed her hand. "We run again. Now." They moved fast, through another hallway that curved impossibly, turning back into itself. Walls pulsed. Floors breathed. The lights above flickered in red and black. They stopped again in a stairwell. "I know a way out," he said. "But you won't like it." "I don't care," she gasped. "I just want out." He pointed up. "The roof. There's a way to signal breaks up there." "Just don't look down, or it sees you." They climbed. The stairs spiraled forever, growing thinner, tighter. Her ears popped. The air tasted like ash. Behind them, faint laughter echoed. A child's laugh, broken and wrong. They reached the top. The door to the roof was heavy, rusted. Travis kicked it open, and they stepped into blinding white. Fog everywhere. The building below was gone. Only fog, and a single plank of wood stretched out into the nothing. Narrow, barely wide enough to walk. "This is it," he said. "You walk. Don't run. Don't look back." "What happens if I fall?" He looked at her. "No one falls. You just vanish." She stepped onto the plank. It creaked. Fog wrapped around her legs, her arms. Shapes moved in it, whispering, giggling, crawling. Then she looked back. Travis was gone. So was the roof. She was alone. And ahead of her, just beyond the fog, someone waited. A figure, wide-eyed, smiling, wearing her face. And Eliza didn't remember stepping off the plank. She didn't remember screaming or falling or waking up. Only the sensation of being swallowed by fog, her skin tightening like it was being pulled inside out, her thoughts unraveling like threads soaked in black ink. Then, darkness and a sound, ticking, not from a clock. It was wet, organic, like bones clicking together, like teeth chattering behind a wall. When her eyes opened, she was back in her apartment. At least, it looked like her apartment, but the light was wrong. It didn't come from the ceiling fixtures. Instead, it pulsed from beneath the floorboards, soft and blue, like the glow of a deep-sea creature. Shadows moved without her, sliding along the walls even when she was still. The door was closed. Of course it was. Eliza sat up on the couch. Her chest burned like she had drowned and only just come back. Every breath was cold. Her clothes were dry, but her skin felt damp. A fine mist clung to her arms. Her hair smelled like ash. The knife she'd taken before was gone. There was something written on the wall now, above the door. Look through it, but don't blink. She stared at the words, heart thudding. They pulsed in time with the light. Eliza approached the door slowly. The peephole stared back like an eye. She didn't want to look through it, but her body moved on its own. Her hand rose, her face pressed close. The hallway beyond had changed. The walls were black, charred. The floor cracked open in places. Ash drifted through the air. At the far end of the corridor stood a figure, not moving, not breathing, just watching. Its head was tilted slightly. It had no eyes, but Eliza felt it see her. Then the sound came again. Tick, tick, tick. The figure stepped forward, soundless. Eliza's body locked in place. She couldn't move, couldn't look away. The figure's movements were broken, as if it was being pulled forward by invisible strings. One foot, then the other. Its face stretched into a grotesque mockery of her own, wide-eyed, hollow. It reached the halfway point of the hallway, still looking straight at the peephole, still looking at her. Eliza tried to step back, but the peephole wouldn't let her go. Her skin stuck to the cold metal around it. Her breathing grew ragged. The figure kept walking. Closer, closer. Its mouth opened now. Something wet and black dripped from its lips. Tick, tick, tick. It stopped right in front of the door. So close that she could see its cracked fingernails, the twitch of muscle beneath its thin skin, the way it mimicked her every breath. Then it smiled and knocked. Once, twice, a third time. The peephole shattered. Eliza stumbled back, shards of glass clinging to her cheek. She fell hard against the floor, ears ringing. Blood trickled from her nose. The door remained closed, but something moved behind it. No footsteps, just a soft, scratching sound. Like a child dragging their fingers along wood, she crawled away toward the kitchen. The lights flickered again. Tick, tick, tick. The fridge buzzed and died. The oven clicked on without being touched. Then a noise from the bathroom, a gurgling, like water rising from a clogged drain. She turned slowly. The bathroom door creaked open on its own. Inside, the mirror was fogged. The sink overflowed with black water. Eliza inched closer, knifeless, breathless. Her reflection returned slowly, too slowly, and behind it, another shape, tall, crooked, its limbs too long for the frame. She whirled around, nothing there. When she turned back to the mirror, it had changed. She was no longer reflected, only the hallway, the same hallway she'd seen through the peephole. Only now she was the figure, watching. And in the distance, near the far end of the corridor, stood another version of herself, smiling, knocking. She slammed the bathroom door shut. Her mind spun. What was real? What part of this was a dream or memory or something worse? She curled into a ball in the living room, sobbing into her knees. Time passed, or didn't. The ticking never stopped. It was louder now, no longer isolated to a corner or a wall. It came from everywhere. She stood again, hours later, or maybe minutes. She needed answers. If Travis had survived, maybe he knew something, if anyone had. She left the apartment. The hallway returned to normal. But that meant nothing. Each door she passed whispered. Soft voices, her name. Faint crying. The creak of bed springs. The sound of someone humming a lullaby, just out of tune. Then she saw it. Apartment 3D. The door was ajar. Inside, candles flickered, dozens of them. Travis sat in the center of the room, surrounded by red string. He'd drawn symbols in chalk on the floor, some smeared with what looked like blood. "Eliza," he whispered, "you weren't supposed to look through it." "I didn't blink," she said quietly. "That doesn't matter," he replied. "Looking is enough. It saw you. Now it wants inside." "What is it?" He shook his head slowly. "There is no it. There is only reflection. I saw my mother. Others saw children. Lovers. But it always ends the same." He pointed to his eye. "You looked, so it wears your face." Eliza's stomach turned. "How do I stop it?" "You can't," he said, "but you can trap it if you give it something else to wear, someone else to knock for." He looked at her. "Someone who's been marked." She backed away. "No, I won't do that." Travis gave a broken laugh. "You already did." Then the candles went out. In total darkness, she heard it. Breathing. Close. Right beside her. And a soft tick, tick, tick of fingernails tapping the wall. The door slammed shut. Syntha. The darkness in Travis's apartment was thick. Not just the absence of light, but something that seemed to live in the shadows. Eliza didn't dare move. She could hear him breathing. Or maybe it wasn't him anymore. Tick, tick, tick. The sound came from behind her, then to the side, then above. It wasn't steady anymore. It skipped and stuttered like broken clockwork, as if something was crawling through the walls, confused, hungry, impatient. Then came the whisper. At first, she thought it was Travis, but no. This voice was too close. It slithered into her ear without sound waves, only presence. "Eliza, I know your name. I wear your skin. She bolted toward the door. Her shoulders slammed into it. Locked. She spun in the dark, feeling along the walls. Her fingertips grazed something wet. A texture like raw meat, like the surface of a tongue. She recoiled, then kicked. The door burst open. Candles reignited behind her all at once, casting wild, leaping shadows against the walls. Travis was still seated, staring blankly into the red string circle, whispering to no one, "You already did, already did, already did." Eliza didn't look back. She ran down the hallway, bare feet slapping against the warped floor. The air was thick with mildew and something worse, copper and rot. The scent of something that had lived too long in silence. She reached her door, slammed it shut, locked the bolt, then pressed her back against it, chest heaving. The apartment seemed to hold its breath, and then the pipes began to hum. A low vibration moved through the walls. Her ears rang with pressure. Beneath the hum, voices swam like fish in murky water. Countless whispers, overlapping, unfinished. Some laughed, some cried, some just repeated her name. Eliza, Eliza, Eliza. She covered her ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't traveling through her. It was inside her. The kitchen faucet creaked. A single drop of black water hit the sink, then another. Then the voice again, echoing from the drain like a child stuck deep in a well. "Let me out! It's dark! It's so dark! I'm cold in your skin!" The cabinets rattled. The fridge let out a sharp clack, its door popping open. Inside, nothing but her own face, reflected in a sheen of frost coating the interior. But her expression was wrong. Her eyes were wide, her mouth moving. She stepped closer. The frost cleared. The reflection grinned and mouthed, "3 nights or I stay." She slammed the door shut. Tick, tick, tick. The noise had returned, under the floorboards. It circled her. She stepped back toward the living room. The peephole in the front door had been repaired. New glass, polished, waiting. She couldn't resist. She looked. The hallway outside was warped now, stretching into a tunnel of doors. No lights, just an ambient blue glow bleeding from cracks in the ceiling. No footsteps, just whispers. And then the pipes behind her groaned. She turned. The bathroom faucet twisted on by itself. The mirror fogged up. She stepped forward, arms trembling. On the mirror, words appeared slowly, written by an unseen hand. "Who are you without your skin?" Her breath hitched. A sound came from behind the shower curtain, a slow dragging sound, like wet cloth across tile. She reached out, pulled it open. Nothing. But the drain was open and deep, far deeper than a normal tub should allow. Inside it, something moved. Eyes blinking upward, hundreds of them. She backed away, heart racing. Then the toilet flushed. No one had touched it. From the bowl, more whispers rose. They formed sentences now, but not in English, not in any language she knew. Just syllables that tasted of rust and sounded like distant sobbing. She left the bathroom. The floor in the living room had cracked. Hairline fractures had split the wood, and through the gaps she could see water. And beneath the water, her own face drifting, eyes open. Eliza staggered back, nearly tripping. The whispers changed pitch. They begged now. "Let me out! Let me in! I'm waiting inside your voice." Then knocking, not from the door this time, from the walls. Soft, polite knocks, in patterns, rhythmic. Knock, 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 knock. It moved along the apartment, as if something was tapping from inside the structure, trying different exits. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. Then the television turned on by itself. Static. Then a flicker of video. Footage of Eliza. Walking into the apartment for the first time, she gasped. The screen cut again. A new clip. Her, sleeping. Then another. Her, standing in the hallway, looking through the peephole. Another. Her, looking into the camera directly. But she wasn't smiling. She wasn't blinking. Her mouth was open wide, stretched. Something else was inside. Eliza lunged forward and unplugged the TV. The static stopped. The apartment fell into deep silence again. Then came the voice, from her phone. It hadn't worked for days, but now it buzzed on the floor, screen lit. A voicemail was playing, on its own. It was her voice, screaming, crying, then whispering. I let it in. I let it in. I let me in. Eliza threw the phone against the wall. It shattered. The pipes hissed behind her, then gurgled, then screamed. A shrill, high-pitched wail poured through the vents. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. It was every voice she'd heard so far, combined. She dropped to the floor, hands over her ears, sobbing. And still the ticking came. Tick, tick, tick. 3 a.m. The knock returned, 3 times, soft. Then the door handle twisted, slowly. Once, twice, then stopped. The peephole darkened. A shadow passed in front of it. Then a whisper slipped through the crack beneath the door. I wear your name now. The shadow faded. And the peephole blinked. Eliza didn't sleep. She couldn't, because now the whispers had entered the air, and her own voice had started whispering back. Time no longer moved in Eliza's apartment. The clock still ticked, but the hands stayed fixed at 3 a.m. The shadows never shifted. The sky beyond the window remained locked in that sickly pre-dawn haze. Even her own body had begun to betray her. She didn't know how long she'd been awake. Hours, days, or something worse. Her voice was hoarse from screaming. But now she no longer screamed. She just listened. The pipes still whispered. They had grown familiar, too familiar. They didn't just call her name anymore. They told her stories. Fragments of memories she had never lived. A girl who burned alive in apartment 2B. A man who starved while surrounded by food that turned to ash when touched. A child who knocked on doors until his hands bled, asking to go home. And a woman, always the same one, waiting by the window. She watches the fog, the pipe said. She knows the shape it wears. Eliza stood in front of her own window now. Outside, the fog churned, not moving forward, not retreating, just breathing. Figures moved inside it, some human-shaped, others not. They never came closer. But she knew if she looked away, they would inch forward. Just a little each time. So she stared. She didn't blink. The window had become her lighthouse, the only thing she trusted. A soft knock came from behind her. Not the front door. The bedroom closet. 3 knocks. Eliza didn't turn. The air pressed harder against her back, thick with cold breath. Then came the dragging sound, something heavy, clawed, moving from the closet to the hallway. It stopped by the bathroom, waited, then shuffled toward the kitchen. Still, she watched the window. The fog pulsed. A single shape stood closer now. A woman, long black hair, barefoot. Her hands pressed gently to the glass, though she was still outside. Her face was pale, familiar. Eliza blinked once. Gone. Then a creak behind her. She turned. The living room had shifted. The couch was upside down. The television was replaced by a gaping hole in the wall, dark and wet, with breathing inside. The kitchen floor had collapsed entirely, revealing a pool of black water that pulsed like a heartbeat. And sitting in the armchair across the room was herself, but wrong. The reflection from the fridge, the figure from the hallway, the thing behind the peephole. It smiled now, its mouth full of shattered teeth. Eyes wide and unblinking. "Window girl is watching," it whispered in Eliza's voice. Eliza stepped back, knees buckling. The figure tilted its head. "You're almost ready," it said. "You fed me with every glance, every knock you ignored, every breath you gave when I had none." Eliza stumbled toward the door, but the hallway was gone. Only the window remained, and outside the fog had lifted slightly. The building was now floating, not resting on concrete or dirt, but suspended above a vast, yawning void. The fog spiraled down into it, a slow whirlpool of souls and memory. The other buildings she remembered seeing from her first night had crumbled. Some had melted, others floated sideways, like broken bones snapped from a spine. The figure in the chair stood slowly. "You never moved in," it said. "You were always here. You were just the next shape to wear." Eliza turned to the window again. Now she was on the outside. The version of her by the glass was not her anymore. It opened its mouth and let out a knock. 3 quick raps on the inside of the window. Glass did not break, but the sound echoed like a bell through the entire apartment. Tick, tick, tick. Eliza screamed, and then she wasn't in the apartment anymore. She was in a hallway, but not the same one. This one was twisted, longer. The floor dipped with each step. The walls bled with mold and static. The doors on either side were endless, each marked with names. Hers appeared every 5th or 6th, sometimes spelled differently, sometimes scribbled, sometimes burned. She reached one marked simply, Eliza Harrow. It pulsed with blue light around a frame. She opened it. Inside was her bedroom, but cleaner, the way it had looked on the first day. Boxes still packed, the window still fogged, the clock still ticking. On the bed sat the woman, the one from the window. Eliza stepped in. "You've been waiting," she said. The woman nodded slowly. "We all wait until someone else sees us." Eliza looked down. Her hands were fading, not in color, but in substance, the same way the woman's had been, half shadow, half memory, I don't want to be next, Eliza whispered. You already are, the woman said softly. The moment you listened, the moment you looked. From the hallway, footsteps approached, slow, dragging, followed by breathless giggling. The woman stood, walked to the door, and opened it. Fog spilled in like water, and inside it came the next one. A young man, lost, afraid, holding a rental key in his trembling hand. 3C? He asked. The woman nodded and stepped aside. The man entered. His body trembled. He looked around. This place feels weird. Eliza tried to scream, tried to stop him, but her voice was gone. And the woman, her other self, simply whispered, "It always does on the first night." And from the pipes above, the whisper returned, "She waits by the window." The new tenant didn't notice the smell. Not at first. He was too busy dragging his suitcase through the narrow hallway of apartment 3C, muttering under his breath about the elevator being out of service. The door creaked shut behind him like a sigh. The key turned smoothly. The place looked empty, but it wasn't. Eliza watched him from the far corner of the ceiling, her form half dissolved into shadow. She didn't blink, she didn't breathe. She only watched. Because that's what she did now. She waited and watched until the next one learned to listen. The man's name was Darren. He was 29, freshly divorced, and trying to start over. He told himself this place was a steal, rent-controlled, close to downtown, quiet. Too quiet. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air shifted. He noticed the draft, the chill that clung to the base of his spine. He thought it was the weather. He didn't see the small black stain at the edge of the living room rug. He didn't hear the ticking beneath the floorboards, but Eliza did. She could hear everything now. The breath behind the pipes, the blood beneath the wood. The house had learned to whisper louder since her time. It knew how to play softer melodies now. It had patience, and Darren was already humming to its tune. He unpacked slowly. Clothes, a bottle of cheap whiskey, a phone charger, a photograph of his dog, now dead. He set the picture on the nightstand, then noticed the faint outline of a handprint on the glass. He wiped it away, didn't think twice. At 2:42 a.m., he tried to sleep. At 2:58 a.m., the whisper began. It started in the kitchen drain, soft, crooked, a lullaby with no melody, just syllables. He sat up. What the hell? Tick, tick, tick. 3 a.m. Knock. Once, twice, 3 times. He froze. The knock didn't come from the door. It came from beneath the bed. He leaned over slowly, peering into the darkness underneath. Nothing. But when he lay back down, the knock came again, this time from inside the walls. He rose, confused, annoyed. He checked the front door, locked, nothing outside the peephole. He laughed to himself, nervous. Old buildings, he muttered. But the hallway behind the peephole had no lights. He didn't notice that. Eliza did. She floated near the ceiling, her form now nearly transparent. Her body shaped like a woman, only in outline. Her face had melted into something in between. A version of Darren's mother and his childhood fears, That's what the house did now. It used what was already inside. At 3:17 a.m., Darren returned to bed. This time, he dreamed. In the dream, he stood in his living room, but the walls bled. Thick, black liquid dripped from every corner. The floorboards bulged. When he stepped forward, they cracked underfoot. He fell through, landed in the basement, a place he'd never seen but instantly recognized. A room of mirrors. In each one, himself, but in different stages of suffering. One screaming, one rotting, one smiling too wide. All of them watched him. Then they began to knock. From inside the glass, he woke up gasping, heart pounding, sweat pouring down his back. The clock read 3 a.m. again, even though it felt like hours had passed. Mlad had pooled beneath the bed. He didn't know where it came from, but the floor was slick. When he stood, his feet slipped. He hit the ground hard, his face landing inches from a crack in the boards. From it, a whisper. "Eliza, Eliza, Eliza." He stared into the crack and saw an eye looking back. Wide, bloodshot, blinking. He screamed. Eliza watched from above, unmoving. The scream didn't echo. The apartment swallowed it whole. The next morning, if it was morning, Darren sat motionless on the couch, eyes wide, mouth slack. He held the photo of his dead dog, cradling it like a relic. A stain on the floor had grown. Now it stretched from the hallway to the kitchen, a long, jagged trail of something red-black and sticky. It smelled like iron and something sweet. Darren didn't move until the door knocked again. 3 slow, deliberate raps. He didn't answer. The knock repeated, then stopped. Then came the sound, a dragging across the ceiling. Eliza was no longer watching. She was part of it now. She drifted down like a curtain of shadow, her arms long, fingers tapering into nothingness. Her face was a blank mask, with Darren's smile stitched across it. She leaned close, whispered into his ear. "Let me wear you." He wept. He didn't know why. But the tears came anyway. At 3 a.m. the next night, the floorboards cracked, the pipes groaned, and Darren whispered back. Darren stood at the threshold of the bathroom, the door half open, the tiles slick with condensation. The mirror inside had fogged over again, though he hadn't used the sink in hours. Or had it been days? Time no longer made sense here. He stared at his reflection, or what was supposed to be his reflection, and saw a shape behind him. He turned. Nothing. But the whisper returned, not in his ear, but in his mind. A slither of language, too low to decipher, but urgent, persuasive. It didn't speak in words. It spoke in need. Open it. That's what it wanted. Not the bathroom door, the door beneath. The trapdoor he had found beneath the rug in the bedroom 2 nights ago. Or maybe only hours ago. The one with rusted hinges and a lock that didn't match any key he owned. The one that pulsed when touched. Eliza had never opened it, but Darren was not Eliza. He staggered back into the bedroom, the mattress torn, sheets soaked in something thick and black. The air smelled of copper and wet stone. The photograph of his dog had vanished. In its place was a new image, framed and dusty, a picture of him asleep in the apartment, taken from the ceiling. He kicked it across the room. The floor creaked beneath his feet. Whispers came from the walls again, but now they carried tone, emotion. Not pleading, not warning, excitement. He fell to his knees and peeled back the rug. The trapdoor stared up at him. Its frame was iron. Its handle was slick with something warm. He placed his hand on it and felt something pulse beneath, like a heartbeat or breath or memory. Don't open it. The words came from inside him, but they weren't his. They sounded like Eliza and someone else. The voices of others who had lived here and died here and stayed. He pulled anyway. The door opened with a scream, a long mechanical shriek of metal twisting against rusted bolts. Heat poured out from below. So did the smell. Rotting paper, burned hair, salt water. He descended. The ladder was endless. Wooden rungs, slick with slime. Shadows moved past him, some climbing down faster, some climbing up in reverse. He reached the bottom and stepped into nothing. A black void that hummed. It stretched in all directions. No walls, no floor. Only water, thin as mist, covering his ankles. He turned in a slow circle. The silence here was total. Until it wasn't. Drip, drip. Footsteps behind him. Then a voice. His voice. "Darren, you left the door open." He spun. The thing wore his face, but younger, smiling, covered in peeling skin like paper left out in the rain. Its mouth opened too wide, too long. "Let me in," it whispered. "You already did." Darren backed away. Each step echoed louder than the last, bouncing off invisible walls. He ran, but the void ran with him. Shapes loomed in the dark. Eliza, Travis, a girl with no mouth, an old man whose eyes blinked sideways. All watching, all waiting. Each of them whispered one phrase in perfect unison. "Don't open it." Darren fell to his knees, clutching his head. Then he screamed, and the sound didn't fade. It fractured. The void shattered like glass. He blinked and was back in his bed. Sweating, shaking. The photo was gone, the rug untouched, the trapdoor sealed. Had it been a dream? His hands told him no. They were covered in ash. The door knocked once, then again, then a third time. His phone lit up from the nightstand. 3 a.m. The peephole blinked. Darren crawled from the bed and approached the door. He knew what waited on the other side. It would wear his mother's voice. It would smile like Eliza. It would ask politely, then not so politely, then forcefully. He pressed his face to the peephole. A woman stood outside, wide-eyed, hair soaked, her skin loose and wrong. She leaned close and whispered into the keyhole. "You opened it. Now it opens you." The lights flickered. The pipes moaned. The mirror in the bathroom shattered on its own. Darren fell to the floor. His body convulsed as something entered. Through his mouth, through his eyes, through every breath he'd taken in that place. He wasn't Darren anymore. He was the next skin. The apartment welcomed him. It sighed. And upstairs, in the attic, no one remembered, a new door appeared. Behind it, countless voices whispered. A chorus of the forgotten, each repeating the same truth in a language Darren now understood. Don't open it, but he already had. There was no more sleep. Not in apartment 3C, not anymore. The night stretched on forever, smeared into a looping canvas of ticking clocks, dripping walls, and whispers crawling from unseen mouths. The air inside the apartment was thick, layered with mildew, blood, and a scent like burnt feathers. Something ancient stirred behind the drywall, something that had been waiting. Darren no longer recognized himself in mirrors. He moved like a man in water. His reflection lagged a heartbeat behind, and when it smiled, he didn't. It was Eliza's smile, or Travis's, or someone else's. It changed each time. He sat at the center of the living room, surrounded by silence so dense it buzzed inside his ears. A television flickered despite being unplugged. The kitchen light swung back and forth, though there was no wind. The peephole was gone. In its place was a round black eye carved into the door, slightly moist at the edges. It blinked when he passed. He tried to scream days ago, but the apartment swallowed sound. Now he whispered like the others, like the pipes, like the walls. He had opened the trapdoor. He had brought something through, not fully, but enough. The apartment was a womb now, swelling with its presence. The thing was close, so close, and the only thing keeping it sealed was the mirror in the bedroom, cracked but intact. The mirror pulsed every hour, a ripple across its surface like breath caught in glass. And Darren knew, without being told, that when it shattered completely, the thing would crawl through. Not into the apartment, into everything. That night, 3 a.m. came like a slow blade through his chest. The ticking stopped, the walls sighed, and the mirror cracked a little more. Darren stood, blood dripping from his nose. His feet left prints across the floorboards, not of blood, but of ink. Words followed behind him wherever he walked, scrawled in languages he had never learned. I am what watches. I am what you named in silence. I am what knocks. He stepped into the bedroom. The mirror greeted him. 1,000 versions of himself stared back, each slightly off. One had no mouth. One was turned around. One was crawling up the inside of the glass. Another simply stood still, blinking and smiling. The cracks in the glass had formed a jagged spiderweb across the center. From the cracks, a sound leaked, breathing, wet and eager. Darren approached. He placed a hand on the mirror. It was cold, but something inside was warm. The reflection behind the cracks leaned forward and whispered, "Let me in." Darren blinked, and then he was on the inside. Now he stared out through a pane of glass into a dim bedroom where another version of him stood and smiled. That version reached forward, picked up a shard of broken glass from the floor, and carved a symbol into the wall, a spiral. The same spiral etched into the base of the trapdoor. The air hissed, the lights flickered, and the mirror shattered, not into glass, into water. Dark water poured from the frame, spilling across the floor. It didn't soak, it spread. Everything it touched warped. The bed sagged into rot. The walls peeled open like wet paper, and the reflection stepped out. It no longer looked like Darren. It wore his shape, but its eyes were mirrors, and its mouth stretched too wide, teeth lined with shadows. It stepped into the apartment like it had always lived there, and the apartment welcomed it. The pipes burst open. The blood-stained floorboards began to twist upward, reaching toward the ceiling like arms. Every mirror in the building cracked. Every door began to knock. Every peephole blinked, and the whispers became a roar. "We remember you. You left the door open. You are the door." A panel opened. Light spilled down. Not white, but pale blue, the color of drowned skin. Something moved inside the attic. Eliza was there, or what had become of her. She no longer walked, she dripped. Black fluid fell from her fingers as she crawled along the beams, whispering in voices that weren't hers. Below, the thing in Darren's shape turned toward the window. Outside, the fog had parted, revealing everything. The city wasn't a city anymore. It was a reflection. A mirror world stretched upside down across the horizon, pulsing with dim light and spiraling structures. People walked the streets below, but none of them had faces. They moved like puppets, and they all turned toward apartment 3C. They saw. Darren's body stood at the window and raised a hand. The city blinked. The apartment groaned. And the mirror in the hallway cracked. Then everything stopped. Time paused. And a single voice whispered from the cracked ceiling, "One more night." The reflection turned, smiled, and walked back into the bedroom. The trap door had opened again. The spiral glowed red. Something below it moved. Something with too many hands. Something with Eliza's voice, and Darren's breath, and your face. 3 a.m. Every clock in the building struck at once, not with chimes, but with knocks. Soft at first, then louder, then everywhere. Knock, knock, knock. Walls trembled, light bulbs hissed and died. The spiral carved into the trapdoor pulsed with red light. Each beat a silent countdown to something final. Darren stood barefoot in the middle of apartment 3C, no longer a man, but a silhouette held together by memory and guilt. His eyes were not eyes. They were reflections. Mirrors that bent inward, showing what he used to be and what was waiting to replace him. The door was no longer wood. It had become a living membrane, pulsing with each knock like a heartbeat. And behind it, the thing was awake. Not the reflection, not Eliza, not Travis. The original. The voice behind all the voices. The eye behind all the peepholes. The one who had waited and knocked. Across centuries, across cities, across skin. It had fed on every breath that stank of fear. Every moment someone pressed their face to the door and listened. Now it had grown full, and it wanted to enter. Eliza's whisper moved through the walls like a wind. He opened it. Now it opens us. Darren turned toward the mirror in the hallway. What remained of it was no longer glass. It had stretched, bubbled, warped. A liquid screen of writhing faces swam beneath the surface. They didn't scream anymore. They whispered, "Welcome." The apartment began to collapse inward. The hallway folded like wet paper, the kitchen turning inside out as if being devoured by some invisible mouth. Light bent and fell into the spiral on the floor. Every door in the building clicked open at the same time, except the front door. It was still closed, still waiting. One final knock. Darren stepped toward it. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from instinct. Even now, the last part of him that remembered what it meant to be human wanted to run. But there was nowhere to go. Behind him, the walls bled names. Eliza, Travis, Marla, John. Names scratched in loops, overlapping, written in blood and ink and shadow. They spilled onto the floor, up the ceiling, crawling into the spiral, feeding it. Outside the door, someone waited, or something, and it had Darren's voice. "Let me in," it whispered. "Let me out." Same words, different meaning. Same face. Different origin. The knock came, slow, deep, final. Knock, knock, knock. The eye in the center of the door blinked once, then vanished. And the door opened inward. The hallway was gone. In its place stretched a black corridor of flesh and memory, a tunnel lined with ribs, each one etched with mirrors. A low humming sound came from deep inside, like a choir of mouths breathing in unison. Darren stepped forward. Every surface he touched remembered him. Every echo whispered his regrets. He passed rooms he didn't remember, filled with people he'd once known, but whose faces were now inverted, smiling with no eyes. Hands pressed against invisible walls. Behind them, reflections moved before their actions, like they were leading reality, not following it. And at the very center of it all stood a door, plain, wooden, old, but it wasn't meant to be opened. It was open. Inside, the apartment again, empty, pristine, freshly painted. A woman stood by the window, hair wet, barefoot, wide-eyed. She turned and looked at Darren. "You took too long," she said. And behind her, fog began to pour through the glass. Not outside, inside. The sky cracked, not thunder, a shattering, and every mirror across every building in the city followed. A wave of glass and screens. As the fog spread, it crept into cracks beneath doors, crawled through drains, hissed from old vents. It whispered a single phrase over and over. You heard it. You looked. You let it in. Eliza vanished into the fog. Darren stepped forward. The room flickered like a dying bulb. The walls rippled like skin. And then the city began to knock. Every door, every window, every pipe. Knock, knock, knock. Some opened, some didn't. Those who answered were never seen again. Those who didn't heard whispers for the rest of their lives. Above the skyline, the spiral burned into the clouds. A symbol etched across memory, a warning, a promise, and deep in the ruins of apartment 3C, where no door stood anymore, where no mirror reflected truth. A voice echoed. It sounded like you, saying, "I only wanted to see who was there." And now you know, they always knock. You were just the first to answer.